All right, welcome everyone. This is our fifth Q&A with New Jersey New Jersey Film Festival filmmakers, and we're proud to be here with Julia Kots and Freek. Pronounce your last name for me.
Zonderland, but that was a very good pronunciation of my first name. I'm impressed.
I was kind of given some help with Julia, so she told me exactly how to do it, so I wouldn't embarrass myself. But nice to meet you, Freek. And
Likewise.
we also have Stephanie Mann and Hamsa Hassan here to ask questions. But before we jump in to talk about Inez and Doug and Kira, you want to get more information about our festival, you go to our website, which is njfilmfest.com. When you get to our website, click on where it says New Jersey Film Festival Fall 2020 schedule. And then when you get to that page, it'll ask you to click on another link that will bounce you to our eventive.org site, because Eventive is our virtual film festival provider. Normally our festival would be live, but of course, because of COVID-19, we're now holding the festival virtually, and they do a really great job. So you can find out more about this wonderful film and other films that we're showing. We're showing 41 films over the course of select Friday, Saturday, and Sundays between September 13th and October 23rd. And we'll be announcing the winners on October 25. There's 13 film programs, shorts, features, experimental films, documentaries, and the wonderful Inez and Doug and Kira, which is Julia Kots's baby. She's the director, the producer, the editor, the writer of the film. So you're really an Orson Welles, a kind of female Orson Welles.
Yeah.
And that's why my first question is, I asked you in another written Q&A that we're going to be doing, that's going to be out on New Jersey Stage and other places, that I saw a lot of comparisons to Citizen Kane. You know, the fact that we're focusing on a woman who has died, and we're getting kind of flashback stories about her life. Very similar to Citizen Kane. Am I crazy comparing your film to that masterpiece?
Well, I mean, it's extremely flattering. First of all, it's flattering to be included in your program, and I wanted to thank you for that, and also just thank you for carrying on, because I know that my film, we've had our festival run just completely destroyed by the pandemic, and I know it's, you know, festival presence is so important, so pivotal for small films, independent cinema. So thank you very much for you know, pivoting and carrying on with the festival. It's very important to me, and it's and all the other filmmakers who you're representing. And thank you for the flattery of the comparison. You know, Citizen Kane, of course, is seminal to any filmmaker. It's a remarkable film, but it is just one in a canon of many that are actually told in flashback. You know, movies like Memento, Rashomon. And I thought back when you asked that question in writing, and the first draft of the script was written in June 2016, so it's been quite a while, to tell you the truth, and I couldn't for the life of me remember focusing on any one particular film for the structure. So Inez and Doug and Kira takes place in present time. Then it's told in flashback, which is not in chronological order, and then also the third time space that the story is told in is dreamscape. So he dreams, and the dreams start to take on sort of a magical realism to them, and then towards the very end, the three time spaces conflate when he has a drunken binge, and sort of the present, the flashback, and the dream all combined together in this one scene. So while Citizen Kane was not a specific influence, it definitely has, you know, I've watched this film many times over my many years as a filmmaker, film student, and I love it. But in particular, it was not. The interesting thing is that I always knew that it would take place in these three time spaces. The one thing that changed throughout the writing process, there was two years of writing it, and the one thing that changed the most was the chronological order of the flashback scenes. And I do remember at one point having them on index cards, all the scenes on index cards, laid out over my entire floor. And my cousin came in, and I had him for days. My cousin opens the door and sees me crawling around pushing these index cards, and she says, "I think you've lost it," and she closed the door and left. So it was that part was interesting. And the other thing about it is that obviously films are shot out of order. Any film is shot out of order, but even our order is out of order. So it was actually very challenging for everybody who worked on it, from the designers, costumer especially, continuity, and the actors, for them to be dealing with a movie that's told in 3 time spaces, one of which is totally out of order. So I actually made a spreadsheet for them where I assigned a real date, like Sunday, December 14th, 2003, for example, to each scene, and then they were color coordinated. The flashbacks were green, the blue was dreams, present day was black, and so they could sort them in, time order or in script order. And I don't know where I would be without spreadsheets. They really saved my butt on this movie.
Well, it's obviously a labor of love for you, because, you just sense that in the film itself. There's so much love in the film, despite all the harrowing things that take place. But anyway, I now pass over to my colleagues to let them talk to you. Go ahead, Stephanie, you get to jump in.
Great, it's so nice to meet you, and I really loved your film. I just wanted to ask, this is a really complex story, and like you were explaining, it took a lot of work as a labor of love, and it's also your first feature film. So why did you choose this particular story as your first feature?
Well, I've been trying to get a feature film off the ground for more than 10 years. I had one project that was around $3 million in scope that I tried to get off the ground for a couple of years, didn't work out. Then I wrote one that was about $1 million that almost came together and fell apart several times. And then I realized what I need to do, which is something I'd feared all along, was make something that's so micro budget that I can just somehow beg, borrow, and steal and scrape this thing together myself. Because the one thing that I learned over a decade of trying to get a film made is that there are so many ways to say no, and I think I've heard most of them. And so when I started writing this, I was mainly constrained by the budget. I had a particular figure in mind, which we ended up going over, but still it's really, really tiny. And so I knew it to take place mostly in one space, and the story kind of just went from there. It had certain themes that I've worked with before, such as very particularly interested in end-of-life issues. But anyway, it just kind of, the story was something that I had in me, but it came out through this filter of budget was the main thing that I had on my mind. And it came out this way, which actually my other scripts and future scripts that I'd written since are mostly comedies. And this one is a drama, although it does have some dark comedy in it. It did come out as a drama because I realized I can't be funny on such a budget. It's just comedy just costs more. So I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to your question.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think at the same time, I like the fact that the comedy is there, but it's really a serious drama. And I think despite the micro budget, it looks like there were millions poured into this film. So you should be very proud that, I mean, it doesn't feel as if it's a low budget film to me anyway.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say, and I think Freek is so very much responsible for that. He made it look just.
Yeah. How did you guys connect? How did you connect with Freek?
Freek, do you want to start telling that story?
Yeah. So one day I got
Well, first of all, Freek lives in Amsterdam. He's calling from Amsterdam right now.
Very cool.
Yes. So I shot a couple of short films in New York and made a showreel and in other parts of the US next to my movies in the Netherlands. And I made a showreel with those with some of those shots that a friend shared on Facebook. And then one day I got a message from Julia, who I didn't know. It was like, "Hey, I like your showreel. Do you want to read my script? We're shooting it this summer." And this summer was like, I don't know, 7-8 weeks, maybe a little longer, maybe like 3 months, but very soon. And she didn't realize at that point that I didn't live in New York. But I was like, yeah, I want to read the script. I'm intrigued. I've never shot a feature. And then I started reading the script, and I was really in love with it. So then we just made it work.
Yeah, we connected a lot over Zoom. There were several lucky breaks that I had on this film, such as meeting Freek. I had a friend who was a cinematographer who was attached to the film who dropped out. He got cold feet to shoot such a small thing so quickly, and he was used to working with more equipment and more help, and he was older, and he just pulled out, and it was really the luckiest thing that ever happened. Although I thought, oh my God, we need to grind to a halt, but then I just saw this notice on Facebook that a friend had posted, and I looked, and it was beautiful. Like all his stuff, he has such an amazing eye, and he also happened to have his own Red camera, which I saw on his website. So I was like, wow, great. But he has this amazing eye, and I could tell that he was young and he was hungry, and he would be willing to scrape together and make it work. And his personality, once I started meeting him over Zoom, over video chat, you know, he's just such a warm person, and so great to work with. And he really made for such great energy on set. He has this amazing sense where not only does he have a great eye for framing, but he also has a very great internal timing for the dramatic beats of the story, because we had a lot of, you know, we were working with sort of shallow depth of field, and you would have a conversation, you know, between these two actors, and he would rack his own focus because we didn't have enough people to.
The hammock scene.
Yeah, exactly. And he would always, like, I edited this, and the footage, it's all in focus. He would just always know instinctively when to rack to which person on which beat. He was so like in with the actors. It was really phenomenal. It was really great working with him.
Very quick
We need to work
DP.
with him again.
Very quick DP, and a lot of handheld, and the handheld is really smooth, and you're able to track the action very nicely. So
only handheld. Because we couldn't afford to ship over the tripod.
you didn't need it. It helps the immediacy of the film, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hamsa, go for it.
So let me just start off by, you guys made an amazing film. And my first question for you guys is, did you have any prior knowledge regarding the topics of the film? How did that like affect your vision of the film after doing more research? And I'm also interested in knowing what that research might have affected the cinematography, and like how that might have affected the cinematography after doing research on the topics of the film.
Well, as far as the script goes, I'll let Freek answer the cinematography aspect of the question. But as far as the script goes, is that it is primarily a work of fiction, but it is based on certain incidents in my life and lives of my friends, people close to me. In particular, there is one friend that I have that I went to high school and college with, who is very much alive still, but she is bipolar, and there were some scenes that are taken, like, just lifted straight out of her life. Some are lifted straight out of mine. And what I found out is that when I started talking to people about it, trying to find financing, trying to find support amongst my group of friends, and people that I knew, I heard all of these other stories, and people started confiding in me, and people I'd known for many years, and I never knew this about them. So it would be like, oh wow, I've known you for like 8 years. I never knew that you were on medication, or I never knew that your brother's institutionalized. And I just realized something that I always known, but not really sensed it, is how prevalent mental illness is in this world, and how little we talk about it. We'd rather talk about, you know, any other kind of embarrassing physical illness than mental illness. And so I do, whereas the film offers no answers to anything and brings up complicated questions, I hope that maybe it'll at least inspire people to open up a bit more about it and discuss it more, because really we don't talk about this nearly enough.
Yeah. Do you think that had a role in not getting the budget that you wanted initially, or is that?
No, I always knew what I wanted this budget to be. I didn't even try to get any kind of company behind it, because I'd had such bad experience with trying to get those other projects off the ground. And I did realize it is a very icky, uncomfortable subject matter, and it would be unlikely.
And I think it's very prevalent given the current state of COVID, meaning that, people's mental health is suffering, and, that's very timely in many ways, because these things are magnified now because of the virus.
Well, now they are, it's true, but I shot this in the summer of 2018. So thankfully I did.
So maybe the timing will help.
To shoot it before COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Stephanie, did you want to ask another question?
Sure. Oh, I think there was a cinematography part to that question.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
I think the cinematography, a lot of Julia was really, really prepared. So she had overheads for all the scenes we did, and we went through the script together a couple of times, trying to figure out how to cover the scenes. And because she's an editor, she really understands coverage and what she needs. So we never sort of overcomplicated a scene, and the rooms were tiny. So we really had to figure it out beforehand. But then sometimes, like one of my favorite scenes is when Doc goes over to Inez after she has a mental breakdown. And we were running a little bit behind schedule. And then we saw the actors do the blocking of the scene in the room and sort of where they had to be. And it was such a beautiful dance between them in that manic energy that we decided to do it in one shot and just follow the action and just be guided by the actors. And that is sort of, we shot for 16 days. And in the end, I just regret that we didn't shoot longer, mainly because the place was so small and it drove us crazy. We became really comfortable being close to each other and really dance around the rooms and be guided by the actors.
Along those lines, I actually had a question about blocking, because I thought it was really interesting throughout the movie, even though it is a triangle movie, as I think Ms. Kots, you have mentioned in the previous Q&A. You see a lot of pairs going on, and I think there's this kind of twin theme happening. And you see Doug is positioned on Inez's right side a lot in like this comforting way, and Louis, like for example, when he asks her out and then he switches over to face her. And I think that's a really interesting like switch in the scene. So how much intention was behind that? Maybe not necessarily exactly that scene, but throughout the film.
Well, the way I work is I draw everything out beforehand. So I will go on Street Easy and pull down a floor plan of whatever apartment we're shooting in, and then I'll take like overheads of like couches and tables and populate it like a interior decorator. And then I draw out where all the people are going to be and where all the camera angles and the shots are going to be. And then when we get there, and the thing is that we had 1 day of rehearsal total. So I rehearsed a couple of the more emotional scenes, but aside from that, like I kind of imagined what all the blocking would be. And then when we get there on the day and we work it out with the actors and I say like, how about you try this? Like, this is the idea that I had. And then we see like, does it feel authentic? Does it feel, and then maybe we'll like change some of it around depending on, where the actors, if it feels good to go there, if she's got like, an impetus to do something else, like we'll obviously change it. But I would say we ended up shooting maybe 75% exactly the way that it was drawn beforehand. And so I come in with ideas beforehand and talk it over with Freek, and we either say like decide, okay, this is good, what I thought, or like we think up of other stuff. But it's all pre-planned. There's no way you could shoot a feature in 16 days if you come in there and you're like, okay, what should we do today? So like you kind of have to pre-imagine absolutely everything. And I mean, most movies work that way regardless of budget. In some, they will even storyboard everything out first if they have, the money to do that and the time to do that. So it was all done ahead of time, and with with, you know, being in such a tight space, one thing that is tricky is not to make things visually boring. So I had to be very, very mindful. Okay, what other scenes do we have in this very same room? We need to stage them differently. We need to stage them against a different wall and have the dynamic be completely different. And obviously also the dynamic between the people would have to reflect like what's going on dramatically in the scene as well. But it was a combination of those things. It had to be like, what is happening dramatically? How are they dancing dramatically? And also, how is this visually going to look in comparison to whatever scenes come before and after it, and what other times we happen to be in the same space, so that it keeps being interesting and driving the story forward.
I'm so glad you said that, because I always tell my students everything is about pre-planning, and you have to do the legwork ahead of time, especially when you're on the clock and you have money. You know, if you have a lot of time, that's a different story. But when you're doing a feature, you've got to have everything together for sure.
I remember reading a biography of Hitchcock or something where he said, you know, the most boring thing about filmmaking is shooting the film, because he'd already reimagined absolutely everything, and so now you just have to execute it, and you know what he had in mind.
Well, tell us a little bit about these three terrific actors.
Oh,
I mean, Tawny Cypress is just amazing as Inez, and all three of them are great. Tell us about how you ended up using these guys.
Yes. So I worked with an amazing casting director, Paul Schnee of Bard and Schnee, and these people do like huge movies. They did Spotlight, the Oscar-winning film, Pitch Perfect, and whatever. And they do a lot of independent film as well. And I was lucky enough to have a relationship with him from years prior. And when time came to shoot this, I gave it to him, and I was like, Paul, do you know any up-and-coming casting directors who would be willing to do this on a shoestring? And he's like, let me read it. He read it right away, and he was like, how about I do this? And I'm like, Paul, you don't understand. Like, our entire budget is like what you get paid. You know, not quite, but he was like, so he was like, how about I do this for? And he mentioned a figure that like I would be embarrassed to even utter such a figure. And he was just, you know, it was for him. It was about giving back. He just saw a project and my passion for it, and he was like, yeah, I guess it's equivalent of like lawyers doing pro bono work or something. It was just, without him and his relationships and his expertise, this script would have never been read by people like Michael Chernus and Tawny Cypress and Talia. So we're great. I'm so grateful to Paul for that. And then with the actors, with each of the three of them, it was kind of a different experience. With Tawny, she auditioned, and I came in early to the casting office, and I ran into her in the ladies' room. She was just washing her hands. She didn't know who I was. And I had this moment of like, I wrote you. Like, I saw this person and I was like, this is remarkable. This is somebody that I imagined and I wrote, and now this person is standing in flesh and blood in front of me. It was like one of those, you know, when like somebody meets their soulmate from across the room and they just know, like that was that with Tawny. It was this experience, this goosebumps. I still get goosebumps just remembering it. And then, you know, she blew it away at the audition, and she's just so she just didn't hold back and really poured her heart into this, because it's a hard role, you know, and they were working in very difficult conditions. They had no green room, no green space. It was so tight, no air conditioning in the summer. I mean, it was really hard. And so oh my God, the amount of crying that they had to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then with Talia, it was different, because Talia, although she's an amazing actress, but she didn't look like the character. She's actually like too conventionally attractive. And I had to like, thankfully the director in me like vetoed the writer in me and decided, you know what, like she's an amazing actor. She can do this no matter what. And then with Michael, we just offered him the part. We didn't, you know, he's not of the caliber of actor where like you'd ask him to come in and audition. And we had lunch, he and I, and he said, how are you going to get, this is your first feature, how are you going to get the actors to these emotional depths in 16 days? And I said, I don't know. And he said that he found my honesty disarming. And he agreed to do it. And the funny thing is that with him, like, I always knew that he could, because I'd seen him in enough stuff, and I saw how, you know, he is such an amazing actor. Yes. I didn't for a second fear that he wouldn't be able to get there. And the three of them, I'm incredibly grateful that they took a chance on me. I mean, I wouldn't. This is crazy. These are like adult people who are crying, laying in for hours in a bathtub full of fake blood, falling down the stairs, throwing up. I mean, like, why did they, just because I told them to do it, why do they do
Probably
it?
because of you, Julia, because your passion was the key, I think, to getting them on board, which is also really so crucial when you're directing a film. And you have to get people to love it just as much as you do. It's never easy to do that.
The interesting thing about it is that in hindsight, I had written all of this comedy, and then this thing came out that was a drama, and in some ways was a lot more sincere, although it was constrained by budget. But I realized that was what got actors of this caliber to be interested in it, because they, like Michael does he gets cast for a lot of comedy because he's a comedy powerhouse, and he has a certain look, and he gets fewer offers of a dramatic leading role where he's in every almost scene, and he gets to do all of these things, these emotional things. So that's actually what was in my favor very much, the depths that this script went to emotionally.
Very cool. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So Hamsa, you get one, and Stephanie, you get the next one, because we're running out of time. So.
All right, so let me just see. So I'm taking some time because I'm deciding between 2 questions. And I'm going to decide. All right. My question is, I'm gonna go with this one. I changed my mind. All right. So I noticed how well the cinematography worked with. Actually, I changed my mind again. All right, I'm gonna ask this question because it's really on my mind. Did you plan for the characters to embody the forms of grief that they did early on in the process, or did that happen organically as you build them up? Because it's kind of curious, did you just decide from the get-go, this is what I wanted them to perform in terms of form of grief, or did you oh, now that I know them better, this is how they would react?
Well, it was, you actually sent me this question beforehand, and I was going to ask you to clarify because I wasn't entirely sure. The script was written, and it was none of it was improvised. So all of the dialogue and all of the action was shot as written. As far as what they brought to the table, we had only 1 day of rehearsal during which I did the most pivotal scenes. And then aside from that, they brought what they brought, which is something that you see in auditions. And that's one of the reasons that you decide to cast the person, the actor, because you see what you can sense, what life experience they're bringing to the table. And so it was, and then you kind of tweak it throughout the different takes, but knowing that, you're going to average maybe 3 or 4 takes per setup, and we had 3 or 4 setups per scene probably, so we were shooting this really, really quickly. So I did have to rely a lot on what they were bringing to the table, but they had a very good understanding of the script as it was written. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, and let me know if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, that was about it, because I was very curious, because grief is very hard to get right of what person to predict a person, I guess is what you answered the question very well. Thank you.
Great. Stephanie?
For my closing question, I would like to know what advice you have for other filmmakers and other cinematographers who have this difficult task of capturing and portraying grief and mental illness and or drug addiction.
Well, I suppose the best thing to do is to talk to as many people as you can who have gone through this and source what your personal experiences are. Unfortunately, it may be difficult emotionally for you, but you have to try to be as open as you possibly can about it. And the other thing is that mental illness, it's like everybody experiences, even if they have the same diagnosis, they could be experiencing it very, very differently. It's a lot more individual than probably physiological illness. So there's no one right way, I suppose, to do it. Freek, in terms of shooting it, would you have some kind of specific advice?
Well, I think the main advice for shooting in general, but especially with hard topics like this, is I see the camera and myself as well as another actor in that sense, and I think you should prepare like an actor as well. So you should really be into the topic and think about it in that sense. Like, how is the camera sort of going to emphasize what the actors are going to do? And in that sense, in planning, and especially without rehearsals, you have to think ahead of what is probably going to happen, and how the lighting and the blocking and how the camera is going to react to that is going to, how that's going to help the actors in that sense. And then communicate with production design and lighting as well about that, how you can bring all those three elements together with the acting to really make it stand out.
And I would say that as a writer and as an editor, professionally, I'm an editor. That's what I do for a living for the last decade and change. So so much of acting is done in the reactions, and I think that is something that people tend to forget, especially when they're starting out, either in acting or in editing and in directing. But so much of it is in listening and reacting to the other actor. So I think that there's some amazing moments out there that are done without words, they're like, one of my favorite things that I love is backs. There's a lot of great acting on people's backs, that we just sometimes when we're driving just focus on driving the narrative forward and driving the dialogue and the scene forward, you forget. But pacing is key. And reactions can be very, very rich.
Wow, so much great stuff. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody for participating in our Q&A. Folks, you need to know on October 16th, we will be showing this film VOD, which means that it'll be available from 12:01 a.m. on the 16th, and it'll be available the entire day, 24 hours. If you decide you want to start watching it at 11:45 on the 16th, you still have another 24 hours to finish it if you start it. So that way you can take advantage of, if you're in Amsterdam, you can watch it, at any time that way. And it's amazing. Some of the tickets we've sold are from people in Europe. We have some folks from Asia that have purchased tickets. So the virtual festival is not my favorite idea. I'd rather have it live in person. We would have been able to have Julia there for sure. And, we don't have that flexibility because the university is closed down. So the virtual festival has now opened it up in another way where we're getting a different audience. So it's got some perks to it as well. So October 16th, Inez and Doug and Kira, Julia Kots' wonderful film will be screening at the New Jersey Film Festival. If you need information, you just go to the website behind me at njfilmfest.com, click on the schedule page for fall 2020, and then click on that link when you get to that page to buy tickets. And this Q&A will be available on our YouTube page, so you'll be able to check it out that way. And I want to thank all of you, Stephanie Mann, Hamsa Hassan, Freek Zonderland, and Julia Kots, director of Inez and Doug and Kira, for participating in our Q&A. I want to say thanks to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having us.
All right, so I'm going to stop recording.